The rain doesn't stop. It never does when everything falls apart. Cassandra's hands won't stop shaking on the steering wheel. The wipers scrape across the windshield. Left, right, left. But the Charleston fog swallows the taillights ahead like they were never there. Like the last 3 years never happened. Her grandmother's locket burns cold against her chest. The baby kicks, hard, just below her ribs, as if asking, "Where are we going, Mama?" 6 months along, and she still doesn't have an answer. Just wadded tissues on the passenger seat, black with mascara, and the taste of salt she can't swallow away. He believed them. He believed her, his mother, over the woman carrying his child. The envelope sits in her purse. Manila. Formal. Confidential. Trust maturation documents. It arrived yesterday, before the world shattered. Before the accusations. Before, "Pack your things and leave." In the rearview mirror, her eyes meet her own, red, swollen, but something else too. Something harder. Ahead, the Blue Ridge Mountains rise like shadows against the black sky. By morning, everything will be different. Before we continue our story, let's welcome our viewers from Australia, and our viewers in the United States, Trinidad and Tobago, Nigeria, the United Kingdom, and Canada. Your loyalty, strength, and spirit have built the foundation of this channel. Every view, comment, and share is a heartbeat in this story we're building together. Now let's go back to our characters. The contract sat on the mahogany table at 142 East Bay Street, waiting for a signature that would change everything. Cassandra Reynolds, 25 and electric with ambition, held the pen steady. Around her, men in tailored suits twice her age shifted in their seats. The waterfront development project, $18 million, prime real estate overlooking Charleston Harbor, was hers. She'd outbid 3 established firms and negotiated terms that made the city council sit up and take notice. "Ms. Reynolds," the lead investor said, extending his hand. "Welcome to Charleston's future." She signed. Clean, confident strokes. The same handwriting her grandmother Dorothy had taught her at a kitchen table in Columbia, practicing signatures on the backs of envelopes because paper was too precious to waste. "Always sign like you mean it, baby girl," Dorothy's voice echoed in memory. "Your name is your word." That evening, Cassandra stood on the terrace of the Gallard Center, champagne she hadn't touched going warm in her hand. The charity gala hummed with Charleston society, old money in pearls and bow ties, talking about restorations and regatta schedules and family names that predated the Civil War. She didn't belong here. She knew it. They knew it. But she'd been invited because money, new money, earned money, her money, opened doors that bloodlines used to guard. "You're the woman who just bought the East Bay development." The voice came from behind her, smooth as aged bourbon. She turned. Elliot Brennan stood there in a tuxedo that fit like it had been born on him, not tailored. Tall, composed, with gray eyes that held something warmer than the calculated politeness she'd grown used to in Charleston's upper circles. "Guilty," she said. "And you're the hedge fund manager everyone says is either brilliant or reckless, depending on who's talking." His laugh was genuine. Usually both. They talked through dinner service, through the silent auction, through the string quartet's rendition of Vivaldi that was supposed to be the evening's centerpiece. He told her about growing up on Kiowa Island, sailing before he could read, the weight of a family name that felt more like anchor than sail. She told him about Columbia, about a grandmother who cleaned the very homes they were standing in tonight, about building something from nothing because nothing was all she'd ever had. "You're not like anyone I've ever met," Elliot said as the evening dissolved into departures and valet tickets. "Is that good or bad?" Cassandra asked. It's real. The next 6 months unfolded like a dream she was afraid to trust. Waterfront park at sunrise, Elliot bringing coffee that was still hot, teaching her the names of the boats in the marina. Rainbow Row at sunset, the pastel houses glowing like watercolors in the coastal light. Rooftop dinners overlooking the harbor where he'd point out constellations and she'd point out architectural flaws in the skyline. He took her to Magnolia Plantation in April, when the azaleas turned the landscape into something from a painting. They walked beneath Spanish moss that hung like memories from live oaks older than the nation itself. "My great-great-grandfather planted some of these," Elliot said, touching the rough bark of an oak. "Family history is everywhere here. Sometimes I feel like I'm living in a museum." "Is that why you stay?" Cassandra asked. "It's why I need you." He turned to her then, dropped to one knee on ground his ancestors had walked. "You remind me there's a world beyond bloodlines and legacy. You make me want to build something new instead of just maintaining something old." The ring was his grandmother's. He admitted that with apologetic honesty, but the choice was all his own. "Marry me, Cassandra. Not because of what I have or where I come from. Marry me because we make each other better." She said yes with tears in her eyes and Dorothy's voice whispering in the back of her mind. "Make sure he loves you for you, baby. Not for what you can be or what you should be. Just you." She thought she had that. God, she really thought she had that. Meeting the Brennans should have been a warning. The estate on Kiowa Island sprawled across 6 acres of prime beachfront, a monument to generations of Charleston wealth. Cassandra arrived in Elliot's car, her dress carefully chosen, elegant but not too expensive, respectful but not submissive. She'd learned how to walk these lines in business negotiations. She thought family would be easier. She was wrong. Patricia Brennan waited on the veranda in a designer suit the color of old money and pearls that probably cost more than Cassandra's first car. Her handshake was cold despite the humid evening. Her smile never reached her eyes. "So you're the developer," Patricia said, the word dripping with something that wasn't quite contempt but wasn't respect either. "Elliot's told us so much about you." Victoria, Elliot's younger sister, stood beside her mother like a reflection in a funhouse mirror. Same calculating gaze, same false warmth. "Welcome to the family," she said, and Cassandra heard the quotes around family, even though Victoria never said them aloud. Dinner was an interrogation disguised as small talk. "Where did your people come from?" "Colombia, though they'd moved around." "What did your father do?" "Construction, when he could find work." "And your mother?" "Nurse's aide at the regional hospital." "And before that?" Cassandra met Patricia's eyes and told the truth because lying would only make it worse later. "My grandmother cleaned houses, including some in the Battery." The silence lasted 3 heartbeats too long. "How industrious," Patricia finally said, the word meaning something else entirely. Only Charles, Elliot's father, showed genuine warmth. Elderly and worn from the cancer that would take him 6 months later, he pulled Cassandra aside after dinner. "Don't let them make you small," he said, his hand paper-thin on her arm. "Patricia grew up with nothing too. She just forgets that now. You remind me why I built this fortune in the first place. For real people, not legacy." He died 3 weeks after the wedding, and with him went any buffer between Cassandra and the Brennan women's quiet warfare. The wedding itself was beautiful despite Patricia's attempts to make it something else. She'd pushed for the Hibernian Hall, a symphony orchestra, a guest list that read like Charleston's social register. Cassandra wanted something smaller, something that felt like them, not like a performance for people who'd never accept her anyway. They compromised on St. Philip's Church, Historic enough to satisfy Patricia, intimate enough to let Cassandra breathe. Her mother cried. Her aunts filled half the pews. Elliot's friends from prep school and Yale filled the other half. Patricia sat in the front row with a smile that looked painted on. The low country estate became their sanctuary. 40 minutes from Charleston, far enough from Patricia's social surveillance, close enough for Elliot's work. Cassandra loved it immediately. The wide porches, the moss-draped oaks, the way sunset turned the marsh grass gold. She kept working. That was important. Her development firm grew despite Patricia's raised eyebrows every time Cassandra missed a family lunch for a client meeting. She didn't need Elliot's money, didn't need his name on her business cards, didn't need anything except what she'd always needed: her own work, her own worth, her own way. But the small cruelties accumulated like sediment. Patricia forgot to invite her to the annual Brennan Foundation Gala. Victoria's comments at family dinners about how nice it must be to marry into security when Cassandra paid for half of everything. The way both women would switch conversation topics mid-sentence when Cassandra entered a room, as if her presence was an intrusion on family business. Elliot noticed. Sometimes, "They're just traditional," he'd say. "Give them time." Cassandra gave them 2 years and watched nothing change. Then came the pregnancy. 8 weeks along, confirmed by her OB/GYN on a Tuesday morning, that started ordinary and became everything. Elliot cried when she told him that night, actually cried, pulling her close and whispering about cribs and college funds and teaching their daughter to sail. "Daughter!" Cassandra laughed. "We don't know yet." "I know," he said with certainty that made her heart break a little because it was so much hope to carry. "We're having a girl, and she's going to be exactly like you." They told the family that weekend. Patricia's congratulations sounded like condolences. Victoria's face went carefully blank before she excused herself to the powder room and didn't return for 20 minutes. Later, Cassandra would realize, that's when everything shifted. That's when passive dismissal became active hunting. That's when Patricia stopped seeing her as an inconvenient daughter-in-law and started seeing her as a threat to eliminate. Because a baby meant permanence. Meant grandchildren carrying Cassandra's blood alongside Brennan blood. Meant the family tree growing branches that Patricia couldn't prune away with social snubs and subtle cruelty. So Patricia did what people like her do when they can't control something. She destroyed it. And Elliot, who loved his mother more than he trusted his wife, let her. Patricia Brennan didn't make mistakes. She made investments. The private investigator cost $15,000 up front, another 10 weekly for surveillance. Worth every penny to document what she already knew. Cassandra Reynolds didn't belong in this family, and soon Patricia would have proof everyone could see. Except the investigator came back empty-handed. "Mrs. Brennan, your daughter-in-law's schedule is remarkably clean. Office, home, doctor appointments, client meetings. There's a business partner she sees frequently, James Chen, but it's always professional. Conference rooms, restaurants with full tables, nothing remotely suspicious." Patricia's jaw tightened. Then make it suspicious. The investigator shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, I document evidence. I don't create it. Then I'll find someone who will." Victoria made the connection. Her college roommate's cousin knew a graphic designer in Savannah, someone skilled, discreet, and willing to bend ethics for the right price. $50,000, cash, delivered to a P.O. box in increments that couldn't be traced back to the Brennan accounts. "We need photos," Victoria said, scrolling through her phone at her mother's Kiowa estate. "Something that looks real. Intimate." Patricia studied the surveillance photos spread across her dining table. Cassandra and James Chen leaving a restaurant in downtown Charleston. Entering an office building on Meeting Street. Standing together outside the Savannah Convention Center after a zoning presentation. These, Patricia said, tapping 3 images. The lighting's dim enough. The angles can be adjusted. The designer worked for 2 weeks. Cropping contexts. Manipulating shadows. Creating the illusion of proximity where there had been professional distance. A hand on a shoulder became a caress. A laugh between colleagues became an intimate whisper. A departing handshake became something that suggested they'd arrived together. Text messages were easier. Victoria had borrowed Cassandra's phone once. Just need to make a quick call, mine's dead. Long enough to screenshot her message history with James. Real texts about project timelines, budget reviews, and client updates. The designer changed timestamps, edited words, and added implications that had never existed. Can't wait to see you again, replaced. Can't wait to finalize this contract. Last night was incredible, replaced. Last night's presentation was incredible. Thinking about you, replaced. Thinking about your suggestion for the lobby design. Hotel receipts were fabricated using templates found online. The Vondu Hotel, overlooking Charleston Harbor, romantic, expensive, plausible. Dates chosen carefully. Times when Cassandra had been traveling for work, when Elliot had been away on business, when alibis would be difficult to verify quickly. Perfect, Patricia breathed, arranging the manufactured evidence in a manila envelope. Absolutely perfect. She didn't think about the truth. Truth was irrelevant. What mattered was perception, and perception could be purchased just like everything else. What Patricia didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Cassandra carried her own secret. One that would make their schemes look like pocket change. Dorothy Reynolds' hands were raw from bleach and scrubbing when she came home from her 3rd job. 5 a.m. shifts cleaning offices downtown. Afternoon shift at the hospital laundry. Evening shift cleaning houses in Charleston's wealthiest neighborhoods. The Battery, where history lived behind wrought iron gates and money spoke in whispers instead of shouts. Her granddaughter, 8-year-old Cassandra, was asleep on the couch. Homework spread around her like fallen leaves. Dorothy touched her hair gently. This child deserves more than I had. More than her mama can give her. So Dorothy saved. Every dollar that didn't go to rent or food or Cassandra's school supplies went into a coffee can in the back of the freezer. When the can was filled, she took it to the bank. The teller who knew her by name, who never made her feel small for depositing crumpled bills in 20s and 10s. Investing today, Ms. Reynolds? The teller would ask. For my baby's future, Dorothy would say. She bought land when nobody wanted it. Kiowa Island before the resort development. Isle of Palms when it was still wild beaches and hurricane-battered cottages. Folly Beach, when surfers outnumbered tourists. Property that rich folks ignored because it wasn't developed yet, wasn't fashionable yet, wasn't profitable yet. Dorothy saw what Charleston would become. She'd cleaned enough powerful people's homes, overheard enough dinner party conversations about development plans and zoning changes and investment opportunities that they discussed freely because housekeepers were invisible. She was invisible. So she listened. And she bought. By the time Cassandra turned 18, that coffee can money had multiplied into something Dorothy barely understood. Real estate values had exploded. Her $50,000 in beach property was worth $800,000. Then $2 million. Then more, compounding with strategic sales and reinvestments that her financial advisor, a kind man who'd grown up poor like her, guided with patience. "Ms. Reynolds, you're sitting on a fortune," he told her when she was 72, her body failing but her mind sharp. "It's not mine," Dorothy said. "It's Cassandra's. But she can't have it yet." She created the trust with specific instructions. Cassandra couldn't touch it until she turned 28. Old enough to know who she was. Old enough to know who loved her for her, not for what she had. "Don't tell her the amount," Dorothy instructed her attorney. "Just tell her it exists. That it's her security, her freedom, her choice." The trust grew. Investments carefully managed. Real estate portfolio expanding. By the time Dorothy died, Cassandra 23 and heartbroken, the trust held $2.8 billion. Cassandra honored her grandmother's wishes. She never asked about the amount. Never factored it into her life plans. Built her own career, earned her own money, married Elliot without mentioning the inheritance, waiting like a time bomb set to detonate on her 28th birthday. That birthday came 3 days after Patricia handed Elliot the envelope of lies. Cassandra stood in the nursery, paintbrush in hand, soft lavender spreading across the walls in smooth strokes. The room was coming together exactly as she'd imagined. Gender-neutral colors, natural wood furniture, windows overlooking the marsh where their daughter would watch herons and egrets as she grew. Her phone buzzed. Her attorney's name lit the screen. "Ms. Reynolds, we need to schedule a meeting about your portfolio. The trust matures in 72 hours. There are decisions." "Can it wait?" Cassandra asked, hand unconsciously resting on her belly. "I'm finishing the nursery and I have the Savannah presentation next week." "Of course." But Cassandra, her attorney's voice shifted, became almost paternal. He'd handled Dorothy's estate, had known her grandmother, had watched Cassandra grow up. "Your grandmother built something remarkable. She wanted you to have choices. Freedom. Don't forget that." "I won't." She hung up, returned to painting, humming softly to the baby kicking gently beneath her ribs. The trust felt abstract, distant. She'd built her own life without it. Whatever the amount, it would be security for her daughter. A legacy continuing the way Dorothy had intended. She didn't know that in 3 days, that security would become survival. Across Charleston, at High Cotton Restaurant, Patricia Brennan ordered lunch for 2 and waited for her son. Elliot arrived distracted, checking his phone, thinking about a hedge fund issue that needed resolution before markets closed. His mother looked elegant as always. Pearls, pressed linen, the kind of composed wealth that didn't have to announce itself. "Thank you for making time," Patricia said as he sat. "Of course. What's going on?" She waited until after they'd ordered. Until the restaurant buzzed with enough conversation that privacy felt guaranteed. Then she slid the manila envelope across the white tablecloth. "I need you to see something. I wish I didn't have to show you this." Her voice carried the perfect note of reluctant pain. Years of Charleston society training. How to deliver devastating news while maintaining composure. How to wound while appearing wounded. Elliot opened the envelope. Photos spilled out. Cassandra and James Chen, his wife's business partner, someone Elliot had met 6 times at company events. But these images told a different story. Intimacy. Secrecy. Betrayal. "Mom, what is this?" "I had concerns," Patricia said, her voice trembling with practiced precision. "The way she travels so much. The late meetings. So I hired someone. I didn't want to believe it either, son." Text messages followed. Hotel receipts. A timeline that looked damning if you didn't question it. Elliot's hands shook. "This can't be real." Victoria saw them together. At the vendu. She didn't want to tell you, but Victoria saw them? The repetition bought Patricia credibility. Multiple witnesses. Multiple sources. Multiple lies stacked until they resembled truth. Patricia reached across the table, covered his hand with hers. Tears, real tears, born from pride and fear that her son might choose his wife over her, gathered in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Elliot. But you deserve better than someone who would do this. Especially now, when she's carrying your child." The last part was calculated poison. Your child. Making him question even that. Making every foundation crack at once. Elliot left the restaurant with the envelope burning in his hands and his world narrowing to a single terrible question. How do I confront the woman I thought I knew? He arrived home early. Found Cassandra exactly where innocence lives. In the nursery, painting walls for their daughter, humming off-key, beautiful and present and completely unprepared for what came next. "We need to talk," he said from the doorway. She turned, smile fading at his expression. "Elliot, what's wrong?" He threw the photos on the floor between them. Watched her face cycle through confusion, recognition, horror. "Tell me these aren't real," he said, voice cold as January ocean. "Tell me my mother is lying." Cassandra dropped the paintbrush. Bent, awkward with her pregnant belly, to pick up the photos. Stared at images of herself in situations she'd never been in, positions she'd never held, with a man she'd never touched that way. "These are fake," she said, voice rising. "Elliot, these are photoshopped. I've never. James is happily married. He has 3 children. So did you lie about that meeting at the vendu?" "What meeting? I've never been to the vendu with James. I was in Columbia that day for the State House rezoning hearing. There were 50 people there. It's public record." "Why would she lie to me?" Elliot's voice cracked, not with doubt in his mother, but with certainty in her truth. And there it was. The choice Cassandra had always feared but never believed would come, her word against his mother's. "Because she hates me," Cassandra said desperately. "Because I'm not good enough for her, I've never been good enough, and now there's a baby." "Don't," Elliot cut her off. "Don't make this about her when you're the one caught." "I'm not caught because I didn't do anything." Her voice broke. The baby kicked hard, as if protesting the stress flooding Cassandra's system. "Please, please. Elliot, check the timeline. Call James. Look at my calendar. I can prove. Get out. 2 words. Quiet. Final. What? Pack a bag. Be gone by morning. We'll figure out custody and lawyers later, but I can't look at you right now." "Elliot," she reached for him. He stepped back like her touch might burn. "Go." Cassandra packed through tears that blurred her vision. Clothes thrown into a suitcase without thought for matching or season. Toiletries swept from the bathroom counter. Her grandmother's photo from the nightstand. Dorothy's face smiling from 50 years ago, when the world was simpler and lies couldn't be manufactured with software and malice. She left the nursery untouched. Left the home she'd decorated. Left her marriage dissolving in the rearview mirror as she drove into rain that matched her tears. At a rest stop near the North Carolina border, she called her attorney. "The trust," she said, voice breaking. "I need to access it now." "Cassandra? What's wrong?" "Everything. I need," she pressed her hand to her belly, feeling her daughter kick. "I need options. Freedom. Choices. Like Grandma said. I'll have papers ready by morning." She sat in her car at that rest stop for an hour, hand on her belly, talking to the daughter she hadn't met yet. "We'll be okay, little one. I promise. Your great-grandmother made sure we'd always have choices. And I choose us." The rain hammered the roof. The mountains rose dark ahead. And Cassandra Reynolds drove toward a future that Patricia Brennan never saw coming. Behind her, in Charleston, Elliot sat in the empty nursery and wondered why victory felt like death. The Grove Park rose from the mountainside like a fortress of stone and history, its walls glowing amber in the dawn light. Cassandra stood at the registration desk, her overnight bag at her feet, feeling the baby flutter against her ribs, a gentle reminder that she wasn't alone, even now. "Mrs. Whitmore?" The clerk's voice was kind, professionally neutral. "We have the Blue Ridge suite ready for you." Not Mrs. Whitmore, Cassandra thought, but didn't correct her. Let that name fade with everything else she was leaving behind. Her room overlooked the mountains, range after range rolling into blue infinity. The vastness should have made her feel small, but instead she felt unburdened, as though she'd finally found a scale that matched the weight she'd been carrying. The mountains didn't care about Charleston society or family legacies or manufactured betrayals. They simply existed, patient and immovable. The cramping that had started during the drive intensified. She made the call. Dr. Sarah Martinez met her at the hospital within the hour, her manner brisk but reassuring as she reviewed the ultrasound. "The baby's perfectly healthy. Strong heartbeat. Good positioning. But your blood pressure is elevated, and these stress indicators." She paused, meeting Cassandra's eyes. "Whatever you're running from or toward, you need to slow down. Your body is telling you something." "I'm listening now," Cassandra said quietly. "I promise." Back at the inn, she stood on her private terrace as her attorney team joined via video conference. David Chen, no relation to James, she'd already verified, appeared on her laptop screen alongside two real estate specialists. "We've found something extraordinary," David said. "Biltmore Forest Estate. 50 acres, original 1920s mansion, completely restored by the Blue Ridge Preservation Society. It just came on the market." The virtual tour took her breath away. Not because of the mansion's grandeur, though the sweeping staircase and original crown molding were stunning, but because of what she felt looking at it. Privacy. Peace. Space to breathe. "History?" she asked. "Built by textile magnate Richard Ashford in 1926, one of the real estate specialists explained. "The family lost everything in the Depression. Various owners since, but the Preservation Society bought it in 2018 and spent 5 years returning it to its original glory. State-of-the-art systems hidden behind period details. It's a masterpiece. Price: $340 million. They're looking for a cash buyer who'll respect the restoration." Cassandra didn't hesitate. "Draw up the papers." David blinked. "You want to see it first?" "I've seen enough. This is where I rebuild." The electronic signing took 20 minutes. With each signature, Cassandra felt the future solidifying, taking shape from the ashes of what she'd lost. When it was done, she stood at the terrace railing, one hand on her belly, and allowed herself the first genuine smile in days. "This is where we start over," she whispered to the baby. "Just us." 300 miles away, James Chen stared at his phone in his Mount Pleasant living room, reading the society page notification for the third time. Charleston power couple announces separation. Infidelity allegations surface. His wife Laura appeared in the doorway, their youngest on her hip. "James? What's wrong?" I don't understand." He scrolled through the article, his confusion curdling into horror. It says I had an affair with Cassandra Whitmore. That there's a hotel receipt, evidence. That's impossible, Laura said flatly. You've met her twice. Both times I was there. James was already pulling up his calendar, his phone records, his credit card statements. The alleged affair date jumped out at him, June 15th. I was coaching Tyler's Little League game that day. You took photos. Half the team parents saw me. We need to go to Elliot, Laura said. Now. Elliot's office in Charleston's financial district occupied the top floor of a building his family had owned for 3 generations. James arrived with a laptop, a folder of documents, and a righteous fury that bypassed his assistant entirely. We need to talk, James said, closing the door behind him. Elliot looked up from his desk, haggard. If you're here to gloat, I'm here because your wife accused me of something I didn't do. James opened his laptop, pulling up security footage. June 15th. The day I supposedly took Cassandra to a hotel in Charleston. Watch. The footage showed Cassandra in a Meridian Tech conference room, surrounded by 8 people, reviewing quarterly projections. Timestamps ran along the bottom. 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Building security logs confirmed she never left. And here's me. James pulled out his phone, showing photos of Tyler's baseball game, complete with timestamps and geolocation data. Mount Pleasant Community Field. All afternoon. Elliot's face drained of color. The hotel receipt. Fabricated. I've never stayed at the Francis Marion in my life. Check my credit cards, my phone GPS history, ask my wife, ask 20 Little League parents. James leaned forward. Someone set this up, Elliot. Someone wanted you to believe Cassandra was unfaithful. The question is, who benefits from destroying your marriage? The folder hit the desk with a slap. James's phone records, security footage, witness statements from the baseball game, his complete financial history showing no hotel charges, no unexplained expenses. Elliot's hands shook as he reviewed the documents. The timestamps were irrefutable. The security footage showed Cassandra exactly where her calendar said she'd be. The baseball photos showed James in the dugout, wearing his coaching shirt, his son's team celebrating in the background. What have I done? The words came out strangled. The Whitmore family estate loomed before him, its columns white and judgmental in the afternoon sun. Patricia was in the garden, directing the staff with her usual imperious manner. We need to talk, Elliot said, his voice carrying across the lawn. She turned, startled by his tone. Darling, you look terrible. Have you eaten? You did this. Not a question. A statement. Patricia's expression flickered. I don't know what you. James Chen brought me proof. Security footage, phone records, witness statements. There was no affair, Mother. The hotel receipt was fake. I was protecting you, Patricia said, but her voice had lost its certainty. She was never right for this family, never understood our world. You destroyed my marriage because of your pride? Elliot's voice rose. She's carrying my child, and you made me believe she betrayed me? Victoria appeared on the terrace, drawn by the shouting. Her face went pale when she saw Elliot's expression. Tell me, Elliot said to his sister. Tell me you didn't help with this. Victoria's silence was answer enough. He found the email trail on her laptop within minutes. She'd barely tried to hide it. Receipts from a graphic designer. Instructions for creating a fake hotel receipt. mock-ups showing different versions before they settled on the final product. Payment records. You paid someone to forge evidence, Elliot said, his voice dangerously quiet. You framed an innocent man. You sabotaged my marriage. She was taking you away from us, Victoria whispered. You stopped coming to family dinners, stopped taking mother's calls. Because I was building a life with my wife. The words echoed through the estate. And you couldn't stand that someone else mattered to me more than you did. He was in his car before they could respond, programming the GPS for Asheville, calling Cassandra's number again and again. Each call went straight to voicemail. Her message, "This number is no longer in service," made his chest tighten with panic. The drive took 6 hours, traffic thick through Columbia, then thinning as he climbed into the mountains. He called the Grove Park Inn from the road. Yes, Mrs. Whitmore checked in yesterday, the desk clerk confirmed. But she checked out this morning. She said she'd found more permanent accommodations. Where? Elliot demanded. I'm sorry, sir, I can't disclose guest information. He arrived at the inn anyway, desperate, and found himself in conversation with a chatty concierge who'd just come on shift. Such a lovely woman, she said. So calm, despite everything. Of course, anyone who can buy Biltmore Forest Estate in cash probably doesn't worry about much. Elliot's world tilted. What did you say? Oh, it's all over town. Someone bought the estate this morning. $340 million, all cash. Closed in under 2 hours. Real estate agents are having fits trying to figure out who the buyer is. $340 million. In cash. Cassandra had resources he never knew existed, had built an empire he'd never seen because he'd been too busy defending his family's pride to recognize her power. She hadn't just left him. She'd bought herself a fortress. And he had no idea how to find his way inside. The gates of Biltmore Forest Estate opened with a whisper of expensive machinery. Elliot's hands gripped the steering wheel as he drove through, past towering oaks draped in Spanish moss, past manicured gardens that spoke of old money and older patience. The mansion rose before him, stone and glass catching the morning light, and for a moment he couldn't breathe. He found Cassandra on the east veranda, blueprints spread across a wrought iron table. She wore cream linen, her hair pulled back simply, her belly pronounced beneath the flowing fabric. No tears. No trembling. Just calm, deliberate focus as she marked changes on the architectural drawings. Cassandra! Her name cracked in his throat. She looked up, her expression neutral. Not cold. She'd moved beyond temperature into something more elemental. Distance. I have proof, he said, the words tumbling out. James brought me everything. Security footage, phone records, witness statements. My mother and Victoria fabricated the hotel receipt. They paid a graphic designer. I have the email trail, the payment records. He stepped forward. I'm so sorry. God, Cassandra, I'm so sorry. I should have trusted you. I should have questioned, investigated, believed in us. You should have, she agreed quietly. I'll make this right. Whatever it takes. We can rebuild. Your attorney can contact my attorney. She returned her attention to the blueprints, making another notation. I believe that's the appropriate protocol for separated spouses. Separated. Cassandra, please. 2 men appeared from inside the mansion, both wearing dark suits and earpieces. Professional. Alert. Expensive. Mrs. Whitmore, the taller one said. Is there a problem? Mr. Whitmore was just leaving, Cassandra said, not looking up from her plans. "Please escort him to the gates." "I hired them this morning," she added, finally meeting Elliot's eyes. "Along with a full security staff. No one enters this property without my explicit permission. Do you understand?" Elliot's world narrowed to her face. The woman he'd loved, the wife he'd destroyed, now armored in a composure he'd never seen before. This wasn't the Cassandra who'd begged him to believe her in their bedroom. This was someone new, forged in the fire he'd lit. "Cassandra, please. The baby is perfectly healthy, according to my obstetrician. Your attorney can contact mine regarding visitation arrangements." She gestured to the security guards. "Gentlemen." They escorted him to his car with professional courtesy and immovable determination. The gates closed behind him with the same expensive whisper, and Elliot sat in his driver's seat, hands shaking, watching the only future he'd ever wanted disappear behind wrought iron and stone. The divorce papers arrived at his Charleston office the next morning, delivered by courier. David Chen, her attorney, not James, had drawn them with surgical precision. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Sole custody of minor child. Surname to be Reed. Supervised visitation only, pending psychological evaluation of petitioner. Grounds: irreconcilable differences stemming from unsubstantiated allegations of infidelity and respondents' failure to investigate claims before acting. The defamation lawsuit followed 2 hours later, naming Patricia Montgomery Whitmore and Victoria Whitmore as defendants. $50 million in damages for emotional distress, reputational harm, and intentional infliction of emotional distress during pregnancy. The discovery process was merciless. Every email, every text message, every payment to the graphic designer laid out in clinical detail. The society pages picked it up within days. Charleston matriarch faces lawsuit. Daughter-in-law claims fabricated affair evidence. The whispers started immediately. Country club lunches grew quiet when Patricia entered. Charity board meetings suddenly had schedule conflicts when Victoria's name appeared on the agenda. Elliot was in his attorney's office when Marcus Hendricks, his family's legal counsel for 30 years, went pale reading a document. "What is it?" Elliot asked. Marcus looked up, his expression grim. "Your grandfather's will. There's a morality clause I'd forgotten about. Thought it was standard legal boilerplate. But given recent events..." He slid the document across the desk. Elliot read, his stomach dropping with each line. Any heir proven to have committed fraud, deception causing substantial harm to another person, or actions demonstrably contrary to the principles of family honor and integrity shall forfeit their inheritance immediately, with said inheritance to be redistributed according to executor discretion. Charles witnessed Patricia's behavior in his final years, Marcus said quietly. Her social cruelty, her manipulation. He loved her, but he wasn't blind. He put this clause in place for a reason. The estate executor is investigating? Completed the investigation yesterday. The evidence from Cassandra's lawsuit made it straightforward. Marcus pulled out 2 more documents. Forfeiture notices. Being delivered this afternoon. Patricia sat in the estate executor's office, her posture rigid, refusing to believe what she was hearing. Your trust distribution, $45 million, has been forfeited under the terms of Charles Brennan's will, the executor said, his voice professionally sympathetic but unyielding. Additionally, your position on the Family Foundation Board has been terminated, effective immediately. This is absurd, Patricia said, but her voice wavered. Charles would never. Charles specifically designed this clause to prevent exactly what you've done. Fraud. Deception causing substantial harm. The evidence is incontrovertible. He slid the document toward her. You fabricated evidence of infidelity, paid for forged documents, and deliberately destroyed your son's marriage. The Foundation Board voted unanimously for your removal. The papers trembled in her hands. $45 million. Gone. The board position she'd held for 20 years, the source of her social power, her network, her identity, removed. By evening, her phone lit up with texts from the country club committee. We need to discuss your membership status. The symphony board called. Perhaps it's best if you step down from the gala committee. Her closest friends, women she'd lunched with for decades, suddenly had prior commitments. 3 blocks away, Victoria received her own notice. $30 million forfeited. Her stake in the family's historic King Street properties, redistributed to a family trust she couldn't access. Her carefully cultivated position in Charleston society crumbling like sugar in rain. She called her mother, voice shaking. What have we done? Patricia had no answer. For the first time in her life, she had no answer at all. Cassandra walked the grounds of Biltmore Forest Estate, her hand resting on her belly, architects and contractors following at a respectful distance. The morning mist clung to the mountains, turning the world soft and dreamlike. Here, she said, stopping before the mansion's entrance. I want the sign right here. Bronze. Elegant. Permanent. Serenity Ridge, a sanctuary for renewal. The lead architect made notes. And the interior modifications? 20 guest suites, each named after a resilient woman in history. Sojourner Truth. Malala Yousafzai. Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Marie Curie. Women who rebuilt themselves, who refused to be broken. She looked up at the mansion's facade. Conference rooms for legal consultations, therapy spaces, a wellness center, a library focused on women's empowerment and recovery. The target population? The program director asked. Women in crisis. Domestic violence survivors. Divorced mothers navigating custody battles. Women rebuilding after loss, whether it's marriage, family, identity. Cassandra's voice was steady, purposeful. They'll come here for weeks or months, depending on need. Programs will be sliding scale, including full scholarships for those who can't afford it. The baby kicked, strong and insistent. Cassandra smiled, placing her hand where she felt the movement. We're going to help so many people, little one, she whispered. We're going to turn pain into purpose. The architects dispersed to begin their work, but Cassandra remained on the lawn, looking up at the mansion that was becoming something more than a home. It was becoming a legacy, not built on family name or inherited wealth, but on survival, transformation, and the fierce determination to ensure other women never felt as alone as she had. In Charleston, Patricia and Victoria were learning the price of cruelty. But here, in the mountains of North Carolina, Cassandra was learning something more valuable. The power of choosing grace over vengeance, creation over destruction. The morality clause had delivered justice. But Serenity Ridge would deliver something better. Hope. 3 months had passed since Cassandra signed the papers that made Biltmore Forest Estate hers. Now, at 7 months pregnant, she stood on the veranda watching contractors install the final window in what would become the meditation pavilion. The October air carried the scent of mountain laurel and possibility. Her morning routine had become sacred. Yoga as the sun crested the ridgeline, breakfast of fresh fruit and herbal tea while reviewing project timelines, then video conferences with her Charleston team. Meridian Tech's third-quarter earnings had exceeded projections by 18%. Her absence from Charleston hadn't diminished her business. If anything, the distance had sharpened her focus. "Mom," the tile samples arrived. Her mother called from inside, where she'd been staying for the past month. Linda Reynolds moved through the mansion with easy familiarity, already claiming her favorite reading chair, already planning which bedroom her sisters would take when they visited for Thanksgiving. Cassandra joined her in what would become the main gathering space. Tile samples spread across the floor, earth tones, calming blues, soft greens. Her Aunt Michelle was examining them, her cousin Tanisha taking photos for the absent family members' input. "This one," Cassandra said, pointing to a sage green with subtle gold veining. "For the main hall. Dorothy would love it," her mother said quietly. Cassandra looked up at her grandmother's portrait, newly hung above the fireplace. The oil painting captured Dorothy in her 70s, wearing pearls and that knowing smile. The artist had gotten her eyes right. Sharp, kind, missing nothing. "She'd be proud of all this," Michelle said, gesturing at the renovation plans spread across tables. "Turning pain into purpose. That's Dorothy's granddaughter. All right." In the corner, the nursery plans waited for review. Cassandra had chosen soft yellows and greens, commissioned handmade quilts from local artisans, found an antique rocking chair that reminded her of the one in her grandmother's Columbia home. The room faced east, ensuring morning light would spill across the floor where her daughter would someday play. Her daughter. The words still felt miraculous. 300 miles south, Patricia Montgomery Whitmore stood in her new townhouse in suburban Atlanta, staring at walls that felt like they were closing in. 2 bedrooms, modest kitchen, generic carpet. The humiliation burned worse than any physical pain. Gone was the Lowcountry estate with its 12 bedrooms and staff quarters. Gone were the King Street investment properties Victoria had managed. Gone was the summer house on Kiowa Island where 3 generations of Whitmores had vacationed. The family holdings, redistributed. The trust funds, forfeited. The legacy, squandered. She caught her reflection in the hallway mirror and barely recognized herself. She'd aged a decade in 3 months, new lines bracketing her mouth, gray roots showing between salon appointments she could no longer afford weekly, shoulders curved inward in permanent defeat. Her phone buzzed. "Victoria, coming over. We need to talk about the lawyers." The legal bills were mounting like storm surge. The defamation defense alone had cost them hundreds of thousands, and they were losing. Every piece of evidence Cassandra's team unearthed made their position more untenable. The email trail, the payment records, the graphic designer's testimony, James Chen's airtight alibi. Victoria arrived an hour later, looking equally ravaged. Her designer wardrobe had given way to department store basics. Her weekly manicure appointments, canceled. Her membership at the yacht club, quietly revoked. "They're recommending we settle," Victoria said without preamble, collapsing onto Patricia's second-hand sofa. "The attorneys say if this goes to trial, we could lose everything that's left." "We've already lost everything," Patricia said bitterly. "Not everything. We still have." Victoria trailed off, searching for what remained. She found nothing. Neither woman said what they both knew. They'd done this to themselves. But saying it would require accountability, and that was a skill neither had ever learned. Elliot sat in his home office, the Lowcountry estate now feeling less like home and more like a mausoleum of poor choices. The nursery door remained closed. He couldn't bear to open it, couldn't face the crib he'd assembled with such joy, the mobile he'd spent hours choosing, the coming home outfit still in its tissue paper. His therapist's words echoed, "You chose your mother's narrative over your wife's truth. Until you understand why, you'll repeat the pattern." Twice weekly sessions had become his lifeline and his torture. Dr. Ramesh didn't let him hide behind excuses or justifications. Every session stripped away another layer of self-deception until Elliot could see himself clearly. A man who'd valued family loyalty over marital trust, who'd inherited wealth but not wisdom, who'd had everything and thrown it away for a lie. He'd cut his mother and sister off financially within weeks of discovering their scheme. No more trust fund access. No more family property privileges. He'd personally overseen their removal from the homes they'd occupied rent-free for years. Their tears and recriminations had bounced off him like rain off stone. But cutting them off couldn't erase what he'd done to Cassandra. Every Saturday, he made the drive to Asheville. 6 hours round trip to be turned away at the gate, to leave another letter that would be returned unopened, to sit in his car outside Biltmore Forest Estate and imagine the life happening inside those walls without him. The stack of returned letters on his desk had grown to 23. He kept writing anyway. Charleston family court smelled like floor wax and broken promises. Cassandra appeared via video from Asheville, her face calm and professional on the screen mounted beside the judge's bench. 7 months pregnant, glowing with health and purpose, she looked nothing like the devastated woman who'd fled Charleston 3 months ago. Her attorney, David Chen, occupied the plaintiff's table with military precision, every document tabbed, every argument rehearsed, every piece of evidence ready for deployment. Elliot sat across the aisle with his own attorney, but the outcome was never in doubt. He'd instructed Marcus not to contest anything. Whatever Cassandra wanted, she would have. Judge Marion Foster reviewed the settlement terms with practiced efficiency. Divorce granted on grounds of irreconcilable differences. Sole physical and legal custody of the minor child to be awarded to Cassandra Reed, formerly Whitmore. Supervised visitation for Elliot Whitmore pending paternity establishment and completion of court-ordered psychological evaluation. She looked up at Elliot over her reading glasses. "Mr. Whitmore, do you understand these terms?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you contest any aspect of this arrangement?" "No, Your Honor." Judge Foster's expression softened slightly, or perhaps he imagined it. "Mr. Whitmore, let me be clear. Trust is the foundation of marriage. When that trust is broken, whether through infidelity or through the failure to investigate serious allegations before acting, the consequences are severe and lasting. I hope you've learned that verification matters as much as faith." "I have, Your Honor," Elliot said, his voice hollow. The gavel fell, and just like that, his marriage was over. The defamation settlement came 2 weeks later, negotiated in a conference room that felt designed to drain hope. Patricia and Victoria sat beside their exhausted attorney, reviewing terms they couldn't afford to refuse. $30 million, paid jointly over 10 years. Every asset they had left would go to satisfying this debt. Their futures, mortgaged to pay for their past. But the money was only part of it. "The settlement requires a public apology," their attorney explained, his voice carefully neutral. "To be published as a full-page advertisement in the Charleston Post and Courier, as well as posted to Mrs. Reynolds' social media accounts and website." "Absolutely not," Patricia said. "Then we go to trial, where you will lose, and where the judgment will likely exceed $50 million. The attorney closed his folder. "These are remarkably generous terms given the evidence against you." The apology ran the following Sunday, impossible to miss. "We, Patricia Montgomery Whitmore and Victoria Whitmore, publicly apologized to Cassandra Reed and James Chen for fabricating evidence of infidelity, commissioning fraudulent documents, and deliberately destroying a marriage through deception. Our actions were indefensible. We accept full responsibility and the consequences thereof." Charleston society read it over morning coffee and brunch mimosas. The whispers that had started months ago solidified into permanent judgment. The Whitmore women's names became synonymous with cruelty and deception, cautionary tales told at charity luncheons and garden club meetings. And Cassandra, reading the apology from her veranda 300 miles away, felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just a quiet acknowledgement that some things, once broken, could never be repaired. She called her attorney. The settlement money, every cent goes to Serenity Ridge's endowment. All 30 million? Every cent. Their cruelty will fund healing now. That feels right. After she hung up, Cassandra placed both hands on her belly, feeling her daughter's strong kicks. Violet, that's what she'd decided to name her. Violet Grace Reynolds. A flower that thrived in shade, that emerged stronger after winter, that symbolized resilience and new growth. Your father's family tried to break us, she whispered. But we're building something they could never understand. Something real. The mountains stretched beyond her veranda, ancient and patient. They'd been here long before the Whitmore's cruelty and would remain long after. That permanence comforted her. Some things endured not through force but through simply refusing to yield. She was one of those things now. The contractions started at dawn, gentle at first, a tightening across Cassandra's belly that made her pause mid-stretch on the veranda. She'd been doing her morning yoga, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of rose and gold, when her body announced that today was the day. "Mom," she called, keeping her voice steady. No panic. Just readiness. Linda Reynolds appeared within seconds, already reading her daughter's face. How far apart? 10 minutes, maybe. It's early yet. But her mother was already moving, gathering the hospital bag they'd packed weeks ago, calling the doula, warming the car. By the time the next contraction hit, they were ready. The drive to Mission Hospital in Asheville took 40 minutes, winding down from the mountains into the city. Cassandra watched the fog lift as they descended, tendrils of white releasing their hold on the valleys. Symbolic, she thought. Everything rising into clarity. Her doula, Rachel, met them at the entrance with a wheelchair Cassandra didn't need but accepted anyway. The contractions were stronger now, 5 minutes apart, demanding her full attention. "You're doing beautifully," Rachel said, guiding her through breathing techniques as they moved through admissions. "Your body knows exactly what to do." In the labor and delivery room, Cassandra changed into a hospital gown and let the nurses hook up monitors. The steady thump of her daughter's heartbeat filled the room, strong, insistent, ready. 300 miles away, Elliot's phone rang at 8:47 a.m. David Chen's name on the screen made his stomach drop. "The baby's coming," the attorney said without preamble. "Mission Hospital in Asheville. Mrs. Reynolds wanted you informed." Elliot was moving before Chen finished speaking. "I'm on my way. Mr. Whitmore, she's made it clear." "I know. I'm coming anyway." The drive became a blur of highway and desperation. Greenville passed. Spartanburg. The mountains rising ahead like a wall between him and everything he'd lost. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles went white. He prayed, something he hadn't done since childhood. Prayed for Cassandra's safety, for the baby's health, for a chance to be something other than the man who'd failed them both. 3 hours later, he burst through the hospital's main entrance, wild-eyed and disheveled. The receptionist directed him to the maternity ward, where a nurse with kind eyes and firm boundaries stopped him at the desk. "I'm looking for Cassandra Reynolds. She's in labor. I'm the baby's father." The nurse checked her computer, then her expression shifted. Recognition, perhaps pity. "Mrs. Reynolds has left specific instructions. You're welcome to wait in the family waiting area, but you will not be permitted in the delivery room or recovery room without her explicit consent." "Can you tell her I'm here? Please. I'll pass along the message." The waiting room was standard-issue hospital. Plastic chairs, outdated magazines, a television playing the news on mute. Elliot paced, sat, stood, paced again. Every time the door opened, his heart jumped, hoping for news, for permission, for anything. Hours crawled past. Afternoon became evening. Through the windows, the sun began its descent behind the mountains. In the delivery room, Cassandra was fighting the hardest battle of her life, and winning. "You're at 9 centimeters," the doctor announced. "Almost time to push." Her mother held one hand, Rachel the other. They breathed with her through contractions that felt like they would split her in two, murmured encouragement when she wanted to give up, reminded her of her strength when she forgot. "I can't," Cassandra gasped after a particularly brutal contraction. "You can," Linda said firmly. "You're Dorothy's granddaughter. We don't quit." The memory of her grandmother steadied her. Dorothy had birthed 4 children, buried a husband, built a fortune, and never once complained about the cost. Cassandra could do this. She would do this. 10 centimeters, the doctor said. "On the next contraction, I want you to push." The pushing stage lasted 45 minutes, an eternity and an instant. Cassandra bore down with every ounce of strength she possessed, pushed through pain that rewrote her understanding of endurance, pushed until she heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Her daughter's first cry. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, placing the tiny, squalling infant on Cassandra's chest. Born at 6:23 p.m. Violet Grace Reynolds entered the world at sunset, 7 pounds and 2 ounces of perfection. She had Cassandra's dark curls already visible, wet against her scalp, and when she opened her eyes, gray like Elliot's, Cassandra felt her heart reorganize itself around this new, fierce love. "Hello, baby girl," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm your mama. I've been waiting for you." Linda leaned over them both, crying openly. "Dorothy would be here if she could. But she knew you'd be strong enough to do this without her." The nurse took photos, mother and daughter, skin to skin, both crying, both perfect. A portrait of resilience, of life emerging from heartbreak, of love that required no one's permission. In the waiting room, Elliot stood when a nurse finally appeared. "You have a daughter," she said. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Mother and baby are both healthy." Relief hit him so hard he had to sit down. "Thank God. Can I?" "Mrs. Reynolds has agreed to let you see the baby through the nursery window. Nothing more. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was more than he deserved." The nurse led him down a corridor to the nursery viewing area. Through the glass, he could see rows of bassinets, tiny humans swaddled in hospital blankets. The nurse pointed to one bassinet near the window. "Violet Grace Reynolds," she said. Elliot pressed his forehead against the glass, staring at his daughter. She was asleep, her tiny fists curled near her face, a pink cap covering her head. Perfect. Impossibly perfect. He stood there for 20 minutes, maybe longer, watching her breathe, memorizing her face, understanding, with devastating clarity, what he'd sacrificed for his mother's lies. Security hovered nearby, ensuring he maintained the required distance. No holding, no touching, no entry into the room where Cassandra recovered with their daughter in her arms. "I'm so sorry," he whispered to the glass, knowing Violet couldn't hear him, needing to say it anyway. "To both of you." A hospital volunteer approached him in the waiting room an hour later, carrying an envelope. "From Mrs. Reynolds," she said, handing it to him. Elliot's hands shook as he opened it. Cassandra's handwriting, he'd recognize it anywhere, the elegant script she'd learned from her grandmother. Elliot, you believed a lie over the woman carrying your child. You chose their poison over my truth. You threw me away without investigation, without trust, without the basic respect I deserved as your wife. Violet is perfect. 7 pounds, 2 ounces of pure miracle. She has your eyes and my hair and a future that will be better than what you showed me. If you truly want to be her father, not just biologically, but actually, you'll do the work. Real work. The kind that changes who you are at your core, not just what you say in moments of regret. Trust must be earned, not inherited. You had mine once. You destroyed it. Whether you ever get it back isn't up to apologies or time. It's up to consistent, demonstrated change over years, not months. The courts will determine your path forward. I won't stand in the way of you knowing your daughter, but I will not expose her to the man you were 3 months ago. Become someone worthy of her, and maybe, we'll talk. See. Elliot read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in his pocket, directly over his heart. She was right. About everything. That night, alone in a hotel room with mountain views he couldn't appreciate, Elliot stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. He saw his father's jawline, his grandfather's nose, his mother's eyes. The Whitmore legacy, written across his face. But whose choices would define him? He thought about the past 3 months, therapy sessions that stripped him bare, the painful work of understanding how he'd been shaped by a family that valued loyalty over integrity, the gradual recognition that he'd inherited not just money but patterns, toxic patterns that had poisoned his marriage. His mother had controlled him through guilt and expectation. His sister had manipulated through jealousy and fear. And he'd let them, because breaking free meant admitting that his family, the dynasty, the name, the pride, wasn't worth protecting if it cost him everything real. He pulled out his phone and searched for therapists in Asheville, specialists in family trauma and rebuilding after betrayal. Dr. Sarah Kim's profile appeared, helping clients break generational cycles and build authentic relationships. He called, left a message. My name is Elliot Whitmore. I destroyed my marriage by believing lies instead of investigating truth. I have a daughter I can't hold because I haven't earned the right. I need help becoming someone worthy of her. Please call me back. Then he sat on the edge of the hotel bed, pulled out his journal, and began to write. Day 1 of becoming Violet's father. Today my daughter was born. I watched her through glass, unable to hold her because of my choices. She's perfect. Her mother is stronger than I ever understood. And I'm going to spend however long it takes becoming a man they can both trust. Not for forgiveness. I may never have that. But because Violet deserves a father who questions before condemning, who verifies before vilifying, who values truth over family pride. I'm starting here. From nothing. From less than nothing. Year 1 begins now. He closed the journal, turned off the light, and lay in the darkness, thinking about the 2 most important people in his world sleeping in a hospital room he couldn't enter. Tomorrow, the work would begin. Real work. The kind that changed you from the inside out. Tonight, he simply grieved for the man he'd been, and for the family he'd destroyed by becoming him. In the recovery room, Cassandra held Violet against her chest, feeling the tiny weight of her, the warmth, the absolute trust. Her daughter's eyes were closed, her breathing soft and even. Safe. Loved. Protected. Your daddy's down the hall, Cassandra whispered. He wants to be better. I hope he can be. But whether he is or isn't, you and we're going to be just fine. Violet made a small sound, something between a sigh and a coo. Better than fine, Cassandra amended. We're going to be extraordinary. Through the window, the mountains stood dark against a star-filled sky. Patient, permanent, witness to everything. New life had come from betrayal. Hope had emerged from heartbreak. And tomorrow, when the sun rose over those ancient peaks, Cassandra and Violet would begin their future, together, whole and free. The Forbes photographer adjusted his lens, trying to capture the perfect shot of Cassandra on the veranda of Serenity Ridge. Behind her, the Blue Ridge Mountains stretched into infinity, their peaks softened by morning mist. In her arms, 2-year-old Violet squirmed, pointing at a butterfly dancing among the late spring roses. "Mama, look! Flying flower!" "I see it, baby," Cassandra said, kissing the top of her daughter's head. Those dark curls that were unmistakably hers, those gray eyes that were unmistakably his. "Perfect," the photographer said. "That's the cover shot right there." The article would run next month. How Cassandra Reynolds built a billion-dollar wellness empire from the ashes of betrayal. The writer had spent 3 days at the retreat, interviewing guests, touring facilities, documenting transformation. But the numbers told only part of the story. Serenity Ridge now housed 42 women at any given time, with a waiting list that stretched 6 months. The programs had evolved beyond Cassandra's initial vision. Legal aid clinics staffed by volunteer attorneys, job training workshops, entrepreneurship incubators, childcare services, therapy sessions both individual and group. Women arrived broken and left rebuilt, not because someone fixed them, but because they'd been given space and support to fix themselves. The success stories decorated the main hall's recognition wall. Maya, who'd fled domestic violence with 2 children and now owned a catering business in Asheville. Jennifer, who'd lost custody in a contentious divorce and fought her way back to shared parenting while completing her nursing degree. Diane, whose husband's sudden death had left her financially devastated, now working as the retreat's financial literacy coordinator. Every woman who walked through Serenity Ridge's doors could see proof that survival wasn't just possible. It was a pathway to thriving. Cassandra set Violet down, watching her toddle toward the garden where other children played under a staff member's watchful eye. The retreat had evolved to accommodate women with children, recognizing that healing couldn't happen if mothers were separated from their babies. "Mrs. Reynolds," one of the program directors approached with a tablet. "The Atlanta shelter is asking if we can take 5 more women next month. They're overflow." "Make it happen," Cassandra said. "Add cots to the community rooms if we need to. No one gets turned away." Her grandmother's portrait watched from inside, visible through the open French doors. Dorothy's knowing smile seemed to say, "This is what I meant. This is what wealth is for." 300 miles south, Elliot Whitmore sat in Dr. Sarah Kim's office for his weekly session, now in his 2nd year of intensive therapy. The room had become familiar, the leather chairs, the box of tissues, the window overlooking a small garden where birds congregated at a feeder. "Tell me about the visit yesterday," Dr. Kim said. Elliot's face softened. "Violet's vocabulary is exploding. She showed me every flower in the garden, told me their names. Cassandra's been teaching her." "How did you feel?" "Grateful. Terrified I'll mess it up. Aware that every moment with her is a gift I don't deserve." "Let's talk about that word, deserve." Dr. Kim leaned forward slightly. "You've done 2 years of consistent work. You've severed enabling relationships with your mother and sister. You've dedicated time and resources to causes that support survivors of family manipulation. You show up for every supervised visit, every court date, every requirement. At what point do you give yourself credit for the changes you've made?" Elliot was quiet for a long moment. When Cassandra says I've changed. Not before. And if she never says it? Then I keep working anyway. Because Violet deserves a father who's done the work, whether anyone acknowledges it or not. Dr. Kim made a note. That's growth. After the session, Elliot drove to the non-profit office where he now served as board president. Palmetto Family Services, dedicated to preventing family violence and supporting survivors. He donated $2 million to establish it, but more importantly, he donated his time. Monthly meetings, fundraising galas, direct service volunteering at their emergency shelter. His Charleston social circle had largely fallen away. Some couldn't forgive what he'd done to Cassandra. Others couldn't understand why he'd turned his back on his mother and sister. But Elliot had learned that being liked mattered less than being trustworthy. His life now was simple. Work, therapy, service, and the monthly supervised visits with Violet that had gradually expanded from 1 hour to 4. Building blocks, picture books, playground time. Teaching his daughter that love meant showing up consistently, not just when it was convenient. He'd moved from the Lowcountry estate into a modest townhouse near downtown Charleston. Most of his wealth now funded his penance. The nonprofit, women's shelters across South Carolina, college scholarships for children of divorced parents. He lived on a fraction of what he had, and felt richer for it. His journal entries had become a chronicle of transformation. Year 2, Month 3. Violet called me Dada today. I cried in my car for 20 minutes afterward. Year 2, Month 7. Mother called asking for money. I said no. It's getting easier. Year 2, Month 11. Saw Cassandra from a distance at the custody exchange. She looked happy. That's enough. In a small assisted living community outside Atlanta, Patricia Montgomery Whitmore sat in her studio apartment, staring at a magazine article about Serenity Ridge. The photos showed the mansion she'd never been allowed to enter, the ground she'd never walk, the granddaughter she'd never hold. Forbes estimated Cassandra's net worth at $1.2 billion, combining Meridian Tech's continued success with Serenity Ridge's expansion and her grandmother's original fortune, which had only grown under Cassandra's sophisticated management. Patricia had lost count of how many times she'd tried to call Elliot. His number had been changed, his email filtered, his address undisclosed. The son she'd tried to protect from an unsuitable wife now protected himself from her. Victoria visited monthly, their conversations a litany of bitterness and blame. They'd paid 8 years of the settlement so far, with 2 remaining. Every dollar went to funding the retreat that stood as a monument to their cruelty. We should sue for grandparents' rights, Victoria said during her last visit, though her heart wasn't in it. With what money? What attorney? Patricia's voice was hollow. And even if we could, do you think any judge would grant us access after what we did? They both knew the answer. Some consequences were permanent. Some bridges, once burned, left nothing but ash. The supervised visit happened in Serenity Ridge's visitor cottage, a small but comfortable space designed specifically for these meetings. Elliot had driven up the night before, staying at the same hotel where he'd learned about Violet's birth, making the pilgrimage that had become his routine. Violet burst through the door, pigtails bouncing, carrying a plastic bucket of building blocks. Dada! We build castle today. His heart, which had been rebuilt piece by painful piece over 2 years, swelled almost painfully. The biggest castle ever, he promised. The supervisor, a kind woman named Margaret who'd overseen every visit, settled into her corner chair with her ever-present clipboard. Her job was to document. Was Elliot engaged? Appropriate? Patient with a toddler's attention span? After 2 years, her notes had become consistently positive, but the supervision remained required by court order. They built a castle, then knocked it down and built a tower, then made a bridge that immediately collapsed, sending Violet into peals of laughter that Elliot would replay in his mind for days afterward. Dada, read story? He'd brought 3 picture books, carefully chosen from the list Cassandra's attorney had provided. Nothing too stimulating before nap time, nothing with themes that might confuse a toddler navigating 2 households. Violet climbed into his lap like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like he deserved to hold her. Like his past mistakes didn't matter as much as his present consistency. He read about a caterpillar becoming a butterfly, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to choke him. Dada, Violet said when he finished. Yes, baby. You come again? Next month. I promise. Promise, promise? Promise, promise. Margaret made a note. Child demonstrates secure attachment. Recommend expanding visitation schedule to include overnight visits within 6 months. When the 4 hours ended, Violet ran to Cassandra, who'd been waiting just outside. Mama, we builded castle. Big, big, big. I heard, sweetheart. That sounds amazing. Elliot stood in the doorway, Violet's artwork clutched in his hand. A crayon drawing of what might have been a castle or might have been a rainbow. To him, it was the Mona Lisa. Cassandra met his eyes for the first time in months. Not with anger, but with something else. Assessment, perhaps. Acknowledgement. Margaret says you're doing well, she said quietly, Violet distracted by a butterfly in the garden. I'm trying. I know. She paused. Her birthday is next month. Small party here. If you want to come, Margaret can supervise. 2 hours. It was more than he'd hoped for. More than he'd expected. Thank you. Don't thank me. This is for Violet, not you. I know that too. She nodded and turned to leave, then stopped. Elliot. Yes. 2 years ago, I asked if you'd do the work. You're doing it. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Just recognition. Keep going. It wasn't absolution, but it was something. And something, after 2 years of nothing, felt like everything. That evening, Cassandra stood on her veranda watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of amber and rose. Violet was asleep inside, exhausted from her day, her small fist curled around the stuffed bunny that went everywhere with her. Linda appeared with 2 glasses of wine, one for her, one for Cassandra's grape juice. How was the visit? Good. He's different. Different how? Cassandra considered. Present. Patient. There's no performance anymore. No trying to prove anything. He just shows up and does the work. Is that enough? For Violet? Maybe someday. Cassandra sipped her juice. For me? I don't know. I'm not the same person he married. I don't want what I wanted then. What do you want? Cassandra looked out at the mountains, at the retreat's lights beginning to glow as evening descended, at the life she'd built from betrayal's ashes. This, she said simply. Exactly this. My daughter. My purpose. My peace. She paused. I loved him once, but I love who I've become more. Linda clinked her glass against Cassandra's juice. Dorothy would be so proud of you. I know, Cassandra said, and she did. She felt her grandmother's presence in every decision, every boundary, every moment of strength. Dorothy had taught her that a woman's worth wasn't measured by who loved her, but by how she loved herself. And Cassandra had learned that lesson thoroughly. Inside, Violet stirred in her sleep, murmuring something that sounded like, "Castle." Tomorrow they'd plant flowers in the garden. Next week, 3 new women would arrive at the retreat, seeking sanctuary. Next month, Violet would turn 3, surrounded by chosen family and genuine love. The life Cassandra had now bore no resemblance to the one she'd imagined 3 years ago. It was smaller in some ways. No grand Charleston estate, no powerful family name, no fairy tale marriage. But it was also infinitely larger, richer, truer. She'd lost a husband who didn't trust her. She'd gained an empire built on authenticity, a daughter who was her whole world, and a peace that no one could take away. That wasn't survival. That was a victory. And it was more than enough. Dawn broke over Serenity Ridge the way it always did, gently, inevitably, turning the world from shadow into gold. Cassandra stood on the veranda, Violet balanced on her hip, both of them wrapped in a shared blanket against the mountain chill. "Mama, sun's coming," Violet whispered, as though speaking too loudly might scare it away. "It always does, baby girl. Every single morning." This was Cassandra's favorite time, before the retreat fully woke, before the day's programming began, before the world required anything from her except presence. Just her, her daughter, and the mountains that had witnessed her transformation. Below them, lights flickered on in the guest cottages. Women stirring, beginning their own mornings, carrying their own stories of survival. Some had been here for weeks, others for months. Each one working through her own journey from broken to whole. A car pulled through the gates, new arrivals scheduled for the morning intake. Cassandra recognized the body language even from this distance. Shoulders hunched, eyes downcast, the particular exhaustion that came from fighting battles no one else could see. She'd worn that same posture 3 years ago, driving away from Charleston with nothing but her daughter in her belly and her grandmother's legacy in her bank account. "Come on, sweetheart," she said to Violet. "Let's go welcome them home." The television crew arrived at 9 o'clock, equipment vans and lighting rigs transforming the main hall into a temporary studio. The morning show segment had been scheduled for months, turning pain into purpose, the Cassandra Reynolds story. But Cassandra had insisted they also feature 3 of Serenity Ridge's graduates. The interviewer, Amanda Chen, was nationally known for her empathetic approach. She settled into the chair across from Cassandra, her expression genuinely interested rather than performatively sympathetic. 3 years ago, your marriage ended in a very public way, Amanda began. Fabricated evidence, family betrayal, a lawsuit that made headlines. How did you survive that? Cassandra smiled, the question almost quaint now. I didn't survive it. I thrived through it. Because I refused to let someone else's lies define my truth. That's a powerful distinction. It's an important one. Surviving implies you're just hanging on, just getting through. But I made a choice to build something meaningful from what happened. This retreat, these programs, the women we've helped, that's not survival. That's creation. Amanda leaned forward. Your grandmother left you a substantial inheritance that no one knew about. Talk about the power of financial independence. My grandmother taught me that security comes from within, not from someone else's approval or bank account. Cassandra's voice was steady, certain. Yes, I had financial resources that gave me options. But money without wisdom is just paper. Dorothy gave me both. She taught me to trust my own judgment, to verify before accepting someone else's version of reality, to build my own foundation instead of standing on someone else's. What would you say to women who don't have those resources? That resources come in many forms. Community is a resource. Knowledge is a resource. Stubborn refusal to accept someone else's diminishment of your worth, that's a resource too. Cassandra gestured toward the hall where women were gathering for morning session. We offer financial literacy training here, legal aid, job skills. Because independence isn't just about money. It's about knowing your value and refusing to negotiate it downward for anyone's comfort. Amanda consulted her notes. The defamation lawsuit against your former mother-in-law and sister-in-law resulted in a $30 million settlement. You donated every cent to this retreat's endowment. Why? Because their cruelty doesn't get to define the ending. They wanted to destroy me. Instead, they funded healing for hundreds of women. That feels like justice, not revenge, but transformation of harm into help. The camera panned to capture the 3 graduates seated nearby: Maya, Jennifer, and Diane. Each woman shared her story: the violence, the loss, the moment everything fell apart, and then the slow reconstruction at Serenity Ridge. This place gave me permission to be broken, Maya said, and then space to put myself back together in a way that actually fit who I am, not who I thought I had to be. Cassandra watched them, pride swelling in her chest. This was the legacy that mattered, not the headlines or the settlement or even the empire she'd built. These women, reclaiming their lives. That was everything. That afternoon, Violet played in the garden while Cassandra reviewed architectural plans for Serenity Ridge's expansion. A second building dedicated specifically to single mothers, with childcare facilities and family-friendly programming. Mama! Violet's voice was small, uncertain. Cassandra looked up immediately. What is it, baby? Why Dada doesn't live here? The question hung in the air between them, inevitable and heartbreaking. Cassandra had known it was coming. Violet was 3 now, old enough to notice the difference between monthly visits and daily presence. She set aside her work and knelt to Violet's level. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, sweetheart. Big mistakes. And when that happens, they have to live separately while they work on being better. Dada made mistake? Yes, he did. He say sorry? Many times. And he's working very hard to show that he means it. Violet considered this with a 3-year-old's gravity. Like when I broke cup and had to be gentle? Cassandra's throat tightened. Exactly like that. Okay. And just like that, Violet's attention shifted to a ladybug on a leaf, the conversation complete in her child's mind. But Cassandra remained kneeling in the garden, understanding that this conversation would repeat and evolve as Violet grew. The explanations would become more complex, the questions more probing. How did you balance honoring your daughter's right to know her father with protecting her from the knowledge of what he'd done? The answer she'd learned was carefully, truthfully, age-appropriately, never poisoning the relationship with bitterness, but never pretending the past hadn't happened. Violet deserved better than lies, even kind ones. Elliot sat in his townhouse that evening, staring at his journal. The leather cover was worn now, 2 years of weekly entries taking their toll. Dr. Kim had encouraged him to write to Violet, letters she'd never read, at least not as a child, but that might someday help her understand his journey. Dearest Violet, you're 3 now. Today at our visit, you made me a birthday card even though my birthday is months away. You said, "For when you're lonely, Dada." I cried in my car afterward. Again. Your mother asked me once what I've learned. I've learned that love without trust is just words. That investigation matters more than assumption. That my mother's approval meant more to me than my wife's truth. And that's the kind of man I never want to be again. I chose family loyalty over marital fidelity, not sexual fidelity, but fidelity to the commitment I made. I chose their lies over her truth because it was easier than admitting my family was capable of cruelty. I'm paying for that choice. I'll pay for it for the rest of my life. But I want you to know, I'm not paying in resentment. I'm paying willingly, because you deserve a father who questions before condemning, who verifies before vilifying, who values truth over pride. I may never have your mother's forgiveness. I've accepted that. But I'm working every day to become a man worthy of your respect. That's enough. Has to be. Love always, Dad. He closed the journal and walked to his window, looking out at Charleston's lights. 3 years ago, he'd had everything. Wealth, status, a beautiful wife, a baby on the way. He'd thrown it all away for a lie he never questioned. Now he had a modest townhouse, a daughter he saw 12 times a year, and an ex-wife who might someday trust him enough to allow unsupervised visits. It was both less than he'd had and more than he deserved. The work continued. Therapy every week. Service to causes that mattered. Showing up for every visit, every court date, every requirement. Not for applause or forgiveness, but because transformation required consistency, not drama. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Kim. Remember, you're not your worst moment. You're the sum of every choice you make after it. Elliot read it twice, then turned back to his window. Somewhere 300 miles north, Violet was probably asleep by now, dreaming of butterflies and castles. And Cassandra. He didn't let himself imagine what Cassandra might be doing. That life wasn't his to wonder about anymore. At Serenity Ridge, Cassandra stood in the main hall after everyone had gone to bed, looking up at her grandmother's portrait. The oil paint captured Dorothy's knowing smile, those sharp eyes that missed nothing and forgave everything worth forgiving. "We did it, Grandma," she whispered. "Everything you built, I've built bigger. Everything you taught me, I'm teaching others." The portrait didn't answer, but Cassandra felt the response anyway. In the solid weight of the mansion around her, in the sleeping women finding peace under this roof, in Violet's steady breathing from the nursery monitor on her hip. She walked to the French doors and looked out at the mountains, dark against a star-filled sky. Somewhere in those ranges, other women were fighting battles she'd already won. Other daughters were wondering if they'd survive their mothers-in-law's cruelty. Other wives were deciding whether to believe the lies or trust themselves. Tomorrow, Serenity Ridge's social media would post the morning show segment. Within hours, the phone would ring with new requests for admission, new women seeking sanctuary. The waiting list would grow. The need would expand. And Cassandra would be here, ready. Because she'd learned something her grandmother had always known. A woman's legacy wasn't measured in what she inherited, but in what she built. Not in who loved her, but in how she loved herself. Not in the family name she carried, but in the lives she touched. The plaque beneath Dorothy's portrait read, "Truth is patient. It waits to be proven." 3 years ago, Cassandra's truth had been dismissed, discarded, destroyed by people who valued their pride over her pain. Now that same truth stood proven in 50 acres of healing, in programs that transformed lives, in a daughter who would grow up knowing her mother chose dignity over destruction. Patricia and Victoria's cruelty had funded hundreds of women's fresh starts. Elliot's betrayal had birthed an empire of empowerment. And Cassandra's grandmother's wisdom had ensured that when the worst happened, survival was never in doubt, only the form it would take. She'd chosen to build rather than burn, to create rather than destroy, to turn poison into purpose. That wasn't just surviving betrayal. That was alchemy. The next morning, Cassandra stood at the entrance to Serenity Ridge, welcoming new arrivals. The same hunched shoulders, the same exhaustion, the same question in their eyes. Will I survive this? She met each woman with the same words. This is a place where truth matters and you matter. What happened to you was real. Your pain is valid. And you're going to be okay. Not just okay, you're going to be extraordinary. Violet toddled beside her, handing each new guest a flower from the garden. Daisies, roses, violets. Simple gestures of welcome from a child who would never remember the betrayal that built this sanctuary, only the love that sustained it. By afternoon, the Forbes article hit newsstands and websites. The cover photo showed Cassandra on her veranda, Violet in her arms, mountains rising behind them. The headline, "The billion-dollar empire built on one woman's refusal to be broken." Her phone exploded with messages. Investors wanting meetings. Media requesting interviews. Women's organizations seeking partnerships. The attention was overwhelming and irrelevant. She'd built this for the women who needed it, not for the accolades it generated. That evening, she returned to her grandmother's portrait, Violet asleep in her arms. "They're calling me a success story," she told Dorothy's painted smile. "But you and I know the truth. I'm not successful because I survived betrayal. I'm successful because I refused to let betrayal be the end of my story. I made it the beginning." She thought about Elliot, working his way back from the worst version of himself. About Patricia and Victoria, living with permanent consequences. About the hundreds of women who'd found healing in these halls. About Violet, who would grow up with a different definition of strength than previous generations had known. 3 years ago, she'd been thrown away like trash. Today, she was proof that being discarded by the wrong people was sometimes the greatest gift. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it forced you to rebuild yourself on your own terms. The mountains stood eternal beyond her windows, patient witnesses to every transformation. They'd been here before Charleston society, before the Whitmore name, before any of the pain. And they'd remain long after, indifferent to human drama but somehow comforting in their permanence. Some things endured. Some things grew stronger in the breaking. Some things, like truth, like integrity, like a woman who refused to accept someone else's version of her worth, were unbreakable from the start. You just had to know where to look. Cassandra kissed Violet's forehead, climbed the stairs to their private quarters, and laid her daughter in the bed they still sometimes shared. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new women to help, new programs to build. But tonight, standing in the home she'd bought with her grandmother's legacy and filled with her own purpose, Cassandra Reynolds understood something profound. She wasn't Dorothy's granddaughter because of blood alone. She was Dorothy's granddaughter because she'd learned the most important lesson, that a woman who knows her worth can survive anything, and a woman who builds her own empire doesn't need anyone's permission to thrive. The Whitmores had tried to prove she wasn't good enough. She'd spent 3 years proving she never needed them at all. And that, more than any dollar amount, any headline, any settlement, was the sweetest victory of all. If this story touched you, share where you're watching from in the comments. Your engagement helps us bring more stories like this to life. Subscribe to stay connected to our storytelling family, because these stories matter, and so do you. Thank you for being here.